December 10th, 2008. Inside a $7 million Manhattan penthouse, a 70-year-old man calls his two sons into a room. He has something to confess. The business that made him a legend on Wall Street, the one people trusted with their life savings, their kids' college funds, their entire retirements, was never real. In his own words, it was one big lie. Within 24 hours, his own sons would report him to federal authorities. What he'd built over nearly 5 decades wasn't an investment firm. It was about to become the largest financial fraud in world history. But to understand how Bernie Madoff pulled off the biggest heist in financial history, you have to understand something important. He didn't start as a con man. He started as a lifeguard. In 1960, a 22-year-old Bernard Madoff used $5,000 saved from summers on Long Island's beaches to open his own brokerage firm. A modest start for a man who would eventually claim to control tens of billions of dollars. Over the next 3 decades, he didn't just succeed. He became a pillar of the financial establishment. His firm helped pioneer electronic trading on Wall Street. He later served as chairman of the NASDAQ stock exchange across 3 separate terms. He sat on regulatory advisory committees, consulting on the very rules meant to keep markets honest. By every outward measure, Bernie Madoff was one of the most trusted men in American finance. And that trust became the foundation for everything that came after. Here's what most people don't realize. Madoff ran 2 businesses under one roof. On one floor sat his legitimate market-making operation, a real profitable business that gave the whole enterprise credibility. On another floor, quietly, sat something else entirely, his investment advisory arm. Getting into that side of the business wasn't like opening a brokerage account. It felt like getting invited into an exclusive club. You needed a personal introduction, a friend, a rabbi, a business partner who already trusted him. And that exclusivity wasn't an accident. Scarcity created legitimacy. If someone as careful and connected as your neighbor had money with Madoff, surely it was safe. And the returns matched the exclusivity. Year after year, regardless of what the broader market was doing, Madoff's fund delivered steady annual returns of around 10 to 12%. Never spectacular enough to draw scrutiny. Never volatile enough to cause panic. Just perfectly, suspiciously consistent. So here's how a Ponzi scheme actually works, and why it's mathematically guaranteed to collapse eventually. There's no real investing happening. Money from new investors pays returns to earlier investors. And as long as new money keeps flowing in faster than people withdraw it, the illusion holds. The moment that reverses, the entire structure caves in on itself. Madoff ran exactly this scheme for over 20 years. The fraud had its own physical headquarters, the 17th floor of the Lipstick Building in Manhattan, deliberately separated from the legitimate trading floors above it. There, a small, tightly controlled team generated thousands of fake account statements, each showing steady, believable gains, each one completely fabricated. No stocks were actually being bought. No trades were actually being made. The real money sat in a single account at Chase Manhattan Bank, waiting to be recycled to whoever asked for it next. Remarkably, one man saw through it almost from the start. Financial analyst Harry Markopolos ran the numbers on Madoff's returns in 1999 and concluded within minutes that they were mathematically impossible. The strategy Madoff claimed to use, something called a split strike conversion, would have required options trading volume far larger than the entire market actually had available. Markopolos spent nearly a decade sending detailed, specific reports to the Securities and Exchange Commission, laying out exactly how the fraud worked, and he was ignored repeatedly. The SEC investigated Madoff multiple separate times between 1999 and 2008, and every single time they found nothing conclusive. Not because the fraud was well hidden, but because almost nobody wanted to believe that a man this respected, this connected, this trusted could be lying at this scale. Meanwhile, the money kept flowing in from everywhere. Feeder funds across Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East funneled billions from investors who'd never even heard Madoff's name directly. University endowments invested, prominent public figures invested, and painfully, dozens of Jewish charitable organizations and Holocaust survivor funds invested heavily. Many specifically because Madoff was a trusted, prominent figure within their own community. By late 2008, Madoff's firm claimed to be managing roughly $65 billion. Almost none of it actually existed. Every Ponzi scheme depends on one thing to survive: a constant stream of new money coming in. And in the fall of 2008, that stream ran dry. The global financial crisis was tearing through markets everywhere. Frightened investors pulled cash out of every fund they could reach, including Madoff's. By early December, he faced an estimated $7 billion in redemption requests, and he had nowhere near that much in real liquid assets. On December 10th, with no way left to keep the lie alive, Madoff told his sons Mark and Andrew the truth. He described the business, according to their later testimony, as a giant Ponzi scheme, and admitted it was effectively finished. Both of whom worked in the legitimate side of the firm and always maintained they had no knowledge of the fraud, reported their own father to federal authorities the very next morning. On December 11, 2008, Bernie Madoff was arrested at his apartment. The largest financial fraud in Wall Street history was finally over, and its damage was only just beginning to surface. In March 2009, Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal felonies. He mounted no real defense. In a rare, stunning statement to the court, he admitted the full scope of the fraud himself, acknowledging that no apology could undo the damage he had caused. In June 2009, he was sentenced to 150 years in federal prison, a symbolic number designed to ensure he would never leave. But a prison sentence couldn't undo the human wreckage he left behind. Thousands of investors lost their life savings overnight. Several charitable foundations, including ones supporting Holocaust survivors and medical research, were wiped out completely and forced to shut their doors. Retirees who believed they were financially secure had to return to work in their 70s and 80s. The tragedy reached directly into Madoff's own family, too. In December 2010, almost exactly 2 years after his father's arrest, Mark Madoff took his own life in his New York apartment, unable to escape a fraud he insisted, until the end, that he never knew about. There was at least some measure of justice in the recovery effort. A court-appointed trustee spent over a decade tracking down and clawing back assets from those who had profited from the scheme. And remarkably, his team eventually recovered more than $14 billion of the roughly $17.5 billion in actual principal that victims had lost. One of the most successful fraud recovery efforts in history. Bernie Madoff spent the remainder of his life in a federal prison in North Carolina. He died there in April 2021 at 82 years old, having spent just over 12 years answering, in whatever limited way prison time can answer for, a crime that spanned nearly 5 decades. And that's really what makes the Madoff case the largest Ponzi scheme in recorded history. Not that it was the most technically sophisticated, but that it exploited something far more powerful than any financial instrument ever could: human trust. He didn't need complex algorithms or genuine insider knowledge. He needed a spotless reputation, an exclusive velvet rope, and just enough people willing to believe that if everyone around them trusted him, they should too. It's a lesson that still applies today, in an era of crypto schemes, celebrity-endorsed investments, and can't-miss opportunities flooding social media. If a return sounds too consistent, too perfect, too good to ever question, it probably is. So would you have spotted the warning signs, or would you have trusted him too? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more real stories of history's biggest financial frauds, make sure you're subscribed, because this is only the beginning.